Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskrityam Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayamudire. Nashtaprayeshu Abhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya. Bhagavati Uttama Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtaki. Krishnaya Vasudevaya Devaki Nandanaya Cha Nanda Gopa Kumaraya Govindaya Namo Namaha. Hare Krishna. So today we are reading from Canto 4, which is the creation of the fourth order, chapter 3, which is talks between Lord Shiva and Sati. And today we are at text 21. So, yeah. Papacyamanena ridaturindriya samriddhibihi purusha buddhi sakshinam akalpayesham adhirodhamanjasa param padam tveshti yathasura harim. Word for word. Papacyamanena, which is burning. Irida, with a heart. Atura indriya, who is distressed. Samriddhibihi, by the pious reputation, etc. Purusha buddhi sakshinam, of those who are always absorbed in thought of the Supreme Lord. Akalpa, being unable. Esham, of those persons. Adhirodham, to rise. Anjasa, quickly. Param, merely. Padam, to the standard. Dveshti, envy. Yatha, as much as. Asura, the demons. Harim, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. One who is conducted by false ego and thus always distressed, both mentally and sensually, cannot tolerate the opulence of self-realized persons. Being unable to rise to the standard of self-realization, he envies each person's as much as demons envy the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Purport: the real reason for the enmity between Lord Shiva and Daksha is explained here. Daksha was envious of Lord Shiva because of Shiva's high position as an incarnation of a quality of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And because Shiva was directly in contact with the Supersoul and was therefore honored and given a better sitting place than he. There were many other reasons also. Daksha, being materially puffed up, could not tolerate the high position of Lord Shiva. So his anger at Lord Shiva's not standing up in his presence was only the final manifestation of his envy. Lord Shiva is always in meditation and always perceives the Supersoul, as expressed here by the words Purusha Buddhi Sakshinam. The position of one whose intelligence is always absorbed in meditation upon the Supreme Personality of Godhead is very great and cannot be imitated by anyone, especially an ordinary person. When Daksha entered the arena of Yajna, Lord Shiva was in meditation and might not have even seen Daksha enter. But Daksha took the opportunity to curse him because Daksha had maintained an envious attitude towards Lord Shiva for a long time. Those who are actually self-realized see every individual as a temple of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, because the Supreme Personality of Godhead in his Paramatma feature is residing in everybody's body. When one offers respect to the body, it is not to the material body, but to the presence of the Supreme Lord. Thus, one who is always in meditation upon the Supreme Lord is always offering him obeisances. But since Daksha was not very elevated, he thought that obeisances were offered to the material body. And because Lord Shiva did not offer respect to his material body, Daksha became envious. Such persons, being unable to rise to the standard of self-realized souls like Lord Shiva, are always envious. The example given here is very suitable. asuras, demons, or atheists are always envious of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. They simply want to kill him. Even in this age, we find some so-called scholars commenting on Bhagavad Gita who are envious of Krishna. When Krishna says, Man manam bhavamad bhakta in Bhagavad Gita 18.65, always think of me, become my devotee, and surrender unto me. The so-called scholars comment that it is not to Krishna that we have to surrender. That is envy. The asuras or atheists, the demons, without reason or cause, are envious of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Similarly, instead of offering respect to self realized persons, foolish men who cannot approach the highest standard of self realization are always envious, although there is no reason. So we'll go ahead with Mangalacharan prayers. Om Jnanatimirandhasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Namo Vishnupadaya Krishnaprishtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Niti Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine Jai Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Welcome, dear devotees, to the morning Bhagavatam discussion. I feel very fortunate to have another opportunity to read the Bhagavatam. I must submit I'm completely unqualified, but I do it as a service and for my purification. So before I start, I seek the blessings of my Guru Maharaj, Srila Prabhupada, and all of you devotees so that I can say and share something of some value. So we've been hearing about this section of the Bhagavatam, which is about the interactions between Daksha, Shiva, and Sati. Right? In the previous chapter, Daksha cursed Lord Shiva for not standing up in respect of Daksha when he entered the assembly. And we saw that that turned into a terrible, nasty fight of cursing and counter cursing between Lord Shiva's associates, Nandishwara and others, and Daksha's party of brahmanas and invitees. Now, as all of this was happening, we also saw that Lord Shiva himself, he did not say anything. He just tolerated and he left the sacrificial arena. However, what we learned is that the tension between Lord Shiva and Daksha just continued from there on, right? And for a long period of time, it is said that there was, this tension between the two of them. They were not in, cordial terms at all. So at this point where we are in this chapter, Daksha has become quite puffed up. He has been given the position of chief Prajapati, and he's been performing one yagya after another. At this stage, he is performing another yagya called the Brahaspati Sabha yagya. And to this, he has invited, all the who's from around the world. So all the heavenly denizens, all the celebrities of the universe have been invited to this yagya. But he very deliberately left out Shiva, Lord Shiva, and Sati. Right? So Sati has seen all these people, all these personalities going to her father's yagya ceremony, and she wants to be part of that. Right? And so in this same chapter, in verses 8 through 15, we saw how she pleaded, gave so many arguments as to why, so many reasons as to why they should attend, right? You know, um, a variety of reasons that we won't get into that now. And then from verse 16 onwards, today we are on 21, but from verse 16 onwards, we've been hearing Lord Shiva's response and his reasons as to why it is not a good idea for them to attend that ceremony, because they are uninvited. And although, uninvited, one of Sati's reasons was that uninvited does not matter when it's a close relative, a parent's house. But Shiva's argument was where there is no affection and no respect, one should not go, right? And various other reasons that he's been given. So in today's verse in particular, he continues with his reasoning, and as we saw in the translation, he says that one who is conducted by false ego and thus always distressed both mentally and sensually cannot tolerate the opulence of self-realized persons. And this is a very important reason that he gives. And being unable to rise to the standard of self-realization, he envies such persons as much as demons envy the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So the verse actually starts with Papachyamanena Ridaturendriya, which means that one whose heart is burning in envy. And who is that? Daksha in this case, right? And who is he in envy of? Those that are Purusha Buddhi Sakshinam. Those that are always, the word for word meaning is those that are always absorbed, those who are always absorbed in thought of Supreme Lord. So Daksha is envious, extremely envious of Lord Shiva, right? And his heart is burning in envy because Shiva is always absorbed in thoughts of Krishna. He's at a very elevated level. But um, Daksha, being unable to rise to that standard of self-realization, he says, he envies, the Purusha Buddhi Sakshinam personalities, such persons, as much as demons envy the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Okay, so, a very, very high level of envy. And Srila Prabhupada has written a very elaborate purport. So he says that the real reason for the enmity between Shiva and Daksha is explained here. And what is that? Daksha was envious of Lord Shiva. So that has been the reason for all this, all this commotion that has been, all this ruckus that has been going on between them, right? But why? Why is he so envious? Vidura actually, in the previous chapter, in chapter 2, Vidura had asked that same question to Maitreya Muni, Maitreya Rishi. So he had asked, if you look at text 1 and 2, he had said, why was Daksha, who was so affectionate towards his daughter, envious of Lord Shiva, who is the best amongst the gentle? Why did he neglect his daughter Sati? And then he goes on to say, bringing out the qualities of Lord Shiva, right? And Lord Shiva, he's the spiritual master of the entire world, and he's free from enmity. He's a peaceful personality and is always satisfied in himself. He's the greatest among the demigods. How is it possible that Daksha could be inimical towards such an auspicious personality? So that is, that's kind of a universal question here, right? And so Prabhupada continues in his purport. He says that Daksha was envious of Lord Shiva because of Shiva's high position as an incarnation of the quality of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and because Shiva was directly in contact with the Super Soul and was therefore honored with a better sitting place than he. He was given a better sitting place than he. So the reference to the incarnation of the quality of the Supreme Personality is, of course, because Shiva is actually in charge of one of the modes, right? Tamagun. So while Daksha and Lord Shiva are, so to say, both great personalities, Shiva was in a much higher position than Daksha. Right? Now, why? Because Daksha's opulence was on the material platform. Right? He was an expert in yagyas, in creating progeny, and that's why he was, named the expert. Daksha literally means the expert, and he was actually, given the position of the leader of the Prajapatis by none other than Brahma himself. Right? And Daksha actually executed that, responsibility very, very, very well, so to say. Right? His performance was, exceptional. I mean, we know how he created these batches of thousands of progeny, right? Thousands of sons, and he had very accomplished, daughters, right? Sati being one of them. So, from a material perspective, he definitely had the reason to be puffed up, right? And in addition, he was the father-in-law of Shiva, so he kind of saw himself as, very, very important, very superior. And in contrast, from his perspective, he saw Lord Shiva as uncivilized, very unconventional. He had ashes on his body, snake around his neck, um, matted hair, no material possessions, not even a house. So for him, he was definitely not a candidate, leave out a suitable candidate for a son-in-law. He was not even a candidate for a son-in-law, especially for his most favorite young daughter, Sati. Yet he was almost forced to give her hand in marriage to Sati, right? To this very, very unqualified personality, Shiva. And to add to that, he sees that Shiva is given a higher position. So for Daksha, it was impossible to tolerate, right? That to add to that, that Shiva did not even stand up when the whole assembly, everybody stood up as Daksha entered, like a big celebrity into the arena. Shiva did not even bother to stand up, is what he saw. So, Prabhupada says that his anger at Lord Shiva's not standing up in his presence was only the final manifestation of his envy. So he had this, envy that was building and anger that was, just smothering in his heart. And when he saw Shiva did not stand up, it was the final manifestation. In modern terms, we say it was the straw that broke the camel's back, right? The camel's back was, as it is, had a lot of burden, but then you put a one little straw and that broke the camel's back. But then, in reality, though, Shiva is actually the highest Vaishnava. Right? He is the Vaishnavanam Yathas Shambhu. And as we've seen, he's always in meditation upon the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And so he says, as Prabhupada says, he always perceives the Super Soul. So, spiritually, Lord Shiva is actually highly opulent. You can call him a spiritual millionaire or trillionaire or zillionaire or whatever, right? But a materially conditioned person like Daksha could not accept that opulence of Shiva, of who's self-realized, because one, because of Daksha's false ego. So he was extremely identifying himself with his body. So he had, what's called Dehatmya Buddhi. And two is his envy, as a result of that false ego. So envy, unfortunately, is something very, very close, relatable to us, right? Unfortunately, as we hear, um, envy is the reason why we are here in this material body, right, in this material world. And just last month, in the Vaishnava etiquette seminar, His Holiness Ramapada Swami Maharaj talked at length about envy and just how insidious, it is, right? And deeply set. So we'll draw some points from here as a reminder. Um, so one of the things Maharaj mentioned is Bhaktivinoda Thakur has called envy the most dangerous of all anarthas. It's the most dangerous of all anarthas. And why is that? He said that it's because envy is completely opposite. They are opposite poles to love. Okay, so love and envy just do not go together. So as long as there is envy in the heart, one cannot develop love for Krishna. So, in other words, in our hearts, there is room only for one of the two, either for envy or for love, not for both. Is what we learn, and especially those of us that by some good fortune have come into um, have gotten some knowledge of Krishna and his exalted position and our relationship with him, we are we know that we need to develop love for Krishna, but that is envy kind of stands in the way, right? So Maharaj explained that this envy develops in 4 stages, right? And each stage is more intense than the other. And the reason it is important to know this is because we can, if we are able to catch ourselves early, we can reverse this stage before it becomes too difficult. And Maharaj actually drew from Kapila Dev's talk to Mother Devahuti, which was in Canto 3, Chapter 29, right? Explanation of devotional service by Lord Kapila. From text 21 onwards, he has talked about envy, and that's where Maharaj drew some of this from. So he says that the first stage is avahelana, which means looking down upon others because of a feeling of superiority or pride. Okay. Now, pride and envy, go together. They're like two seeds in a pod or whatever. Now, the modern convoluted idea is to accomplish, right, and to be proud of our accomplishments, right, and keep growing from there. But the thing is, and that's what we've been learning, right, from childhood. That's how the modern education system, or what our mindset is. But the thing is, by that approach, one forgets that our accomplishments, be it our qualities, are actually gifts from a much higher power, right? And if we do not acknowledge that higher power and just keep that feeling of pride in ourselves, at any point of time, these gifts and accomplishments can come crumbling down, right? So um, what we learned in the Vaishnava etiquette seminar also is that as a result of this pride, the power of devotional service cannot be experienced. Okay? A very relatable example of this is a cloudy day. The sun is brilliant, right, and it is there in the sky, but when there is cloud cover, we cannot experience the warmth or the light, right, to the fullest degree. And that's what this envy, or even the first stage of envy, which is avahelana, um, causes. Okay. There are other effects. We don't feel satisfaction in devotional service, and so we may go to get satisfaction from other sources, and that we may get appreciation and some satisfaction, but that is not long lasting because it's not related to Krishna, and so it's kind of a spiraling, not a very nice situation, right? Um, so, how to remedy? Maharaj has also talked about that. How to remedy this disease condition? The answer lies in the opposite of pride, which is humility. Um, um, and Srila Prabhupada has actually said that, when we feel that we are higher than someone, immediately we should catch ourselves, right, and see their connection with Krishna. So what that means is, and uh, the Vaishnava etiquette seminar, Maharaj actually focused on respect. Why respect? He said, respect everyone because Krishna exists in everyone's heart as super soul. So that's the key, right? To see the super soul in everyone's heart and therefore respect them. In which case, it gives us, equips us with the tool for fighting envy, from fighting the envy that rises in our heart. And then there are three more stages which go even deeper. The next is upeksha, which is, we try to avoid others. And the third is hate, dvesha, which is active hatred or envy. Um, and if one gets at this stage, Maharaj had explained that a person never attains peace of mind. And so the impact is it becomes difficult to control the mind, and therefore one cannot truly perform devotional service. And the last one is actual, it's called avamanina or ninda, where one criticizes, the other person. So Vaishnava ninda, or blaspheming a devotee. And Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur has said that blaspheming a devotee is the worst kind of offense. And the result of that, and just listen to this, the result of that is Krishna turns his face away from such a person. Uh, I mean, that is really scary. Krishna turns his face away from such a person. That's what Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says. So, um, So coming back to this, now Lord Shiva is always absorbed in meditation of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And Srila Prabhupada writes that Lord Shiva was in meditation and may not even have seen Daksha entered. But Daksha took that opportunity without giving Shiva the benefit of doubt. He just exploded, and this whole, cursing and criticizing um, business started, right? So clearly, Daksha is in that last stage, that final stage of envy, right? The Ninda or Avamanina stage. So, so yeah. So what is the cure? Srila Prabhupada kind of talks about that as well. Um, it is related to the Bhagavad Gita teaching of Pandita Samadarshina. Right? So Prabhupada says that those who are actually self-realized sees every individual body as a temple of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So, relating to that, the respect because the Supreme Personality of Godhead exists in every personality. And so, because is a temple, because the Supreme Personality in his Paramatma feature is residing in everybody's body. So, when one offers respect to the body, it is not to the material body, but to the presence of the Supreme Personality. Now, Daksha, of course, did not see it in this way because he clearly, identifies himself with the body, and he expected Shiva to offer respect to his material body, and hence all of this that happened. Now, Srila Prabhupada compares um, the envious nature of such people with demons. So he talks about that demons like Hiranyakashipu or atheists who are envious of the Supreme Lord, they are similar to this the people with this deep envy. So definitely having come to devotional service by some good fortune, that's not where we want to go, right? We don't want to be we don't want to be in a stage where we are becoming demoniac like Hiranyakashipu. So so let's endeavor, to take that approach of respect for everyone. And why? Because the Lord resides in everyone's heart as the super soul, and that is going to protect us from the danger of envy, basically. We know that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has, he has come to us by again great fortune just 500 years ago, and he has distributed Krishna Prem indiscriminately, and we have the opportunity, it's there of receiving that Krishna Prem, because again by some good fortune we have landed in Srila Prabhupada's ISKCON. So all we have to do is to actively endeavor to make that space in our hearts, right, for receiving that love. And how? By slowly, surely, working on removing this envy. And by doing that, in parallel, we can purify our ego to the state of Gopi Bhartur Padakamalaya or Dasa Dasa Anudasa, right? Which is our actual ego, which is our actual pure state. So with that thought, I will stop here. I actually have a hard stop. There's a meeting that I'm getting called into, but Guru Maharaj has actually talked a lot more. But then I thought I would touch upon this at a very high level, because this is definitely, it's a good start, and it's foundational to developing all these other qualities that help us make progress, like tolerance, humility, and everything else. So yeah, so thank you very much. Sorry if I misspoke anything. Maybe for 1 minute if somebody would like to add or correct. If not, we'll stop today. Thank you again for joining. Grantharaj Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Srimad Bhagavad ki jai. Nitai Gaur Premanande Hari Hari.
Jai. Hare Krishna, Mataji. Very wonderful class. Thank you.
Thank you, Mataji. Hari Bol.
Hare Krishna.